Denmark is a small country, but its public sector IT decisions have influenced European thinking about government technology for years because the Danish digital strategy has been both ambitious and pragmatic. In 2026, Denmark has taken a specific step that, while smaller in absolute terms than what Germany or France are doing, is worth attention for the clarity of its reasoning and for the specific scope of its commitment. The Danish government, through a coordinated decision spanning multiple ministries and several of the country's largest municipalities, has announced the permanent abandonment of Microsoft Office as its standard productivity software with the transition to LibreOffice and associated open-source alternatives scheduled over the next 2 years. The Danish announcement is distinguished from earlier European experiments in several ways. It is explicitly permanent, not a pilot or a trial. It covers the Office productivity suite specifically rather than the full operating system, which is a more contained scope. And it is coordinated across multiple jurisdictions within Denmark from the start, which is intended to avoid the Munich pattern where isolated migrations were vulnerable to political reversal. I want to walk you through what Denmark is doing, the reasoning. The government has articulated the implementation plan and what the Danish decision tells us about the specific shape of the European shift away from Microsoft products. Let me start with the specifics of the Danish announcement. The Danish Ministry of Finance, which coordinates central government IT purchasing, announced the decision to migrate from Microsoft Office to LibreOffice in a multi-year plan. That will begin in mid-2026 and be completed across central government by end of 2027. The migration includes the central ministries, the National Health Service, the Danish Tax Agency, and various other central government bodies. The plan also includes the Danish Defense Ministry, though with specific security considerations that may result in hybrid configurations for certain classified work. In parallel with the central government migration, the city of Copenhagen and several of the larger Danish municipalities have announced their own migrations on similar timelines. The municipal migrations are not formally coordinated with the central government migration, but they are timed to coincide, and the tooling, training, and support being developed for the central government migration will be available to the municipal migrations as well. The cumulative scope covers perhaps 80% of Danish public sector productivity software installations, with the remaining 20% consisting of organizations that have specific reasons to delay or opt out. The target software stack is consistent across the migrations. LibreOffice, which is developed by the Document Foundation, is the replacement for Microsoft Office for documents, spreadsheets, and presentations. The Collabora online service, which provides web-based collaboration on LibreOffice documents similar to Microsoft 365 Online, is being deployed for collaborative document editing. Nextcloud handles file storage and sharing. Thunderbird with specific Danish government extensions handles email and calendar. For specific functions that require compatibility with external parties who continue to use Microsoft Office, a limited number of Microsoft Office licenses will be maintained, but the mass deployment is entirely LibreOffice. The reasons articulated for the Danish decision, as described in the government's public statements and in the underlying strategy documents, are 3 primary and several secondary. The first primary reason is sovereignty. The Danish government has been increasingly concerned about dependency on United States technology vendors for critical infrastructure, and the Office Productivity Suite is considered critical because it is used for the creation of essentially every document the government produces. The sovereignty reasoning specifically cites the risk that policy decisions by a foreign government could affect the availability or functionality of the software and the desire to have a software stack that is under European or Danish control. The second primary reason is cost. Microsoft Office licensing at the scale of the Danish public sector is a substantial line item in the national IT budget. The Danish government has projected savings over the migration's life that are in the range of several hundred million Danish kroner, with the specific number depending on assumptions about licensing renewal pricing. The savings are material for a country of Denmark's size. The third primary reason is alignment with European strategic objectives. Denmark is an active participant in European Union digital strategy discussions, and the migration to open-source productivity software is consistent with the direction that the European Commission and major member states are taking. By moving now, Denmark is positioning itself within the mainstream of European digital policy rather than outside it. The secondary reasons include specific concerns about data handling under Microsoft 365, concerns about the direction of Microsoft's product strategy toward AI integrations that the government has not fully evaluated for its needs, and a general preference for open-source software that has been articulated in Danish digital strategy documents for years. Microsoft's response to the Danish announcement has been measured. The company has engaged with Danish officials to discuss the decision, has offered specific pricing concessions, and has presented its own version of the arguments for continuing with Microsoft products. The Danish government has considered these offers and has maintained its decision. The company has, in its public response, expressed disappointment but has not engaged in the kind of strong public rebuttal that was seen in some earlier cases. The muted response reflects, I suspect, a recognition that the Danish decision is well-reasoned, well-coordinated, and unlikely to be reversed by pressure. The implementation plan for the Danish migration is detailed and worth examining. The first phase, which runs through the second half of 2026, involves pilot deployments in specific government bodies that have volunteered to be early adopters. The pilot deployments allow the specific tooling, training programs, and support infrastructure to be refined before broader rollout. The pilot bodies include the Ministry of Finance itself, the Danish Digital Agency, and several specific agencies that have existing open-source expertise. The second phase, which runs through 2027, involves broader rollout across central government. The rollout is organized by ministry, with each ministry getting a dedicated migration support team that handles the specific needs of that ministry's workflows. The rollout is paced to allow for troubleshooting and adjustment, with specific review points where the migration plan can be modified based on what has been learned. The third phase, which extends into 2028, involves post-migration optimization. This phase includes refinement of the specific configurations, resolution of edge cases that emerge as users encounter them, and the development of additional training and documentation for users who join the migration later. The training and change management component of the migration is substantial. The Danish government has recognized that the technical migration is only part of the challenge, and that the social and organizational aspects are at least as important. Training programs have been developed for different user categories, from power users who need detailed expertise to occasional users who need basic familiarity. Documentation has been created in Danish, which addresses the specific need that non-English users have for local language support. Help desk support has been scaled up to handle the expected wave of questions during the transition. The specific technical challenges that the Danish migration is addressing include document compatibility with external parties, macro and template compatibility for legacy documents, integration with other systems that had been designed around Microsoft Office, and specific accessibility requirements that Danish law requires for government software. Each of these challenges has been addressed in the migration plan, with specific strategies for each. For observers, the Danish decision provides useful data. The country has chosen a more contained scope than Germany, focusing on office productivity rather than the full operating system. The country has chosen a coordinated approach with timing across central and municipal governments. The country has committed explicitly to the migration rather than running it as a pilot with possible reversal. The combination of these choices suggests a mature assessment of what works and what does not work in public sector IT migrations. The Danish approach may be a template that other countries or jurisdictions find easier to adopt than the more ambitious full operating system migrations that Germany and France are pursuing. Moving just the productivity suite is a smaller, more contained decision than moving the full operating system. The benefits are smaller but also more attainable. For jurisdictions that want to reduce Microsoft dependency without taking on the full complexity of an operating system migration, the Danish pattern is a useful intermediate step. For users and citizens, the implications of the Danish migration are modest but real. Danish civil servants will be using LibreOffice instead of Microsoft Office, which is a change in specific tools. The documents they produce will be in open document formats rather than Microsoft formats, which has implications for how citizens interact with government documents. The costs that Danish taxpayers have been paying for Microsoft licensing will be redirected to other purposes, which is a direct benefit. The specific experience of interacting with Danish government services will be, for most purposes, unchanged because the productivity tools used on the government side are rarely visible to citizens directly. Subscribe for continuing coverage of the Danish migration and the broader pattern of European public sector shifts away from Microsoft products. I will follow the implementation as it progresses and will report on outcomes, including both successes and challenges, as they emerge. And in the comments, tell me whether you think the Danish approach, focused on office productivity rather than full operating systems, is more or less likely to succeed than the broader German and French approaches. The question of what scope of migration is most viable is important for other jurisdictions that are considering similar moves.